On any given weekend, it's not unusual to find Shane Woodring trolling southwest Florida waters in search of mullet and other fish.
I go just about every weekend, do construction work during the week and commercial fish during the weekends. And it's my church. Being on the water, there's nothing quite like it.
One of the locations he knows well is Tarpon Bay, a mangrove-fringed body of water on the bay side of Sanibel Island, about 2 miles west of the causeway. When fishing for mullet, Shane's method of choice is the time-tested art of cast netting, a skill he and his siblings learned from his grandmother, Esperanza Woodring.
Not only how to throw cast net, but to make and mend cast nets. The first net I had was actually handmade. We would take it out here and Grandma Esperanza would show me how to use it.
She taught us all to throw cast nets, and Daddy taught the boys to throw, but she didn't hesitate to say, you know, I don't know what your dad's been teaching you, but let's do this, you know, and try and see if that would be better. She was a mess.
Esperanza Woodring's skills as a castanetter, commercial fisherman, and fishing guide were admired not only by family members, but by visiting anglers, other fishing industry professionals, and the Sanibel community at large. In this documentary, we will hear from friends, family members, historians, and others to examine how and why this resourceful and respected Spanish American became an island icon. We'll also visit the history of Sanibel's Woodring Point on San Carlos Bay. First, the homestead of the pioneering Sam Woodring Sr. family, and later the longtime residence of Esperanza and her husband, Sam Woodring Jr. We'll show you rarely seen home movies of life at Woodring Point as captured by a family member of one of Esperanza's closest friends. Ladies and gentlemen, the Sanibel Historical Museum and Village and the Captiva Island Historical Society present Passion and Courage, the Esperanza Woodring Story. Visit the Tower Gallery on Sanibel and you'll be introduced to the works of numerous local painters, sculptors, craftsmen, and photographers who capture the essence of island life through their art.
These are some of Charlie McCullough's photographs. He lived next door to Esperanza in what was his grandfather's house here on the island. And he started taking photographs of Esperanza. I don't know what year it was, but she was a much younger woman. And he took photographs through the years.
The late Charlie McCullough was a well-known Sanibel photographer who was one of the founders of this artist cooperative gallery.
Here's one of Esperanza. Here she is in front of her house.
Charlie's numerous photos of Esperanza and other aspects of island life are often seen in area homes, restaurants, banks, and other institutions. There's also a book and a website devoted to his photography. And it's clear that Esperanza and her family were some of his favorite subjects.
Oh, here's some of Esperanza. There she is as a young woman. There she is as a much older woman, taking biscuits out of the oven on her wood stove. This photo of Esperanza is one of my favorites. Casting a net's not the easiest thing to do in the world, but here she is out in the water casting the net. She's a very strong woman. I don't mean just physically, but she had to be physically strong too to do many of the things she did. But it's very graceful. It's almost like a dance, seeing the net going around.
Esperanza was more than just a photo subject for Charlie. She was also a friend and neighbor at Woodring Point on Sanibel. For many years, McCullough lived next door to Esperanza in a house that was built by his grandfather in 1908 as a clubhouse where he and his Cincinnati business associates could come during the winter to fish. Esperanza's husband, Sam Woodring Jr., was the fishing guide for the McCullough family, and when Sam died in 1942, Esperanza took over the role as fishing guide in order to support her family.
My grandfather suggested, I could use a good fishing guide. Why don't you be my guide for fishing? And I'll put the word out to my friends, and you put the word out that you're available to be a fishing guide, and I think you'd do very well at it. And that's the story I heard, and she did. She started.
Charlie McCullough's sons shared their father's photography with us for this documentary. Charlie McCullough III told us his father's photos of Esperanza were representative of his fondness for island life.
Okay, well, that's Esperanza in the front, and in the back is my grandfather, Trimble McCullough, and in very fine, I can't believe how he could print that small, but in very fine print, my dad's on the bottom, he says, Grandpop and Esperanza cleaning scallops. I would never have known what they were doing.
Charlie McCullough wasn't the only person to document Esperanza's distinctive role in island life. In her later years, she was deemed to be a living legend by an island newspaper, quote, a reminder of the island's past and at the same time a symbol of its future. Sanibel residents made her the Grand Marshal of their annual 4th of July parade, Queen of the Sanibel Captiva Fishing Derby, and a cast net rodeo was named in her honor. The Sanibel Captiva chapter of the American Businesswomen's Association honored Esperanza with special recognition at a 1988 event where she was accompanied by her oldest son, Preston.
Well, she is considered an icon now, and certainly she is representative of much that had been diverse on this island. The Cuban influence, the fishing influence, shelling, certainly enduring and working hard and making things work in a way that people maybe don't realize was going on at that time.
And I started guiding at Tarpon Bay in '75 part-time. Every day I was out on the water, and we're talking 300 days a year. I would see Captain Esperanza, Captain Woodring I called her, or Miss Woodring, out in her little green boat. Big floppy hat, long sleeve shirt, hands saddle brown, with 2 clients in her little green boat, fishing along Green Point and Tarpon Bay or the bars there, back in Ladyfinger Lakes.
Randy Wayne White was a young Southwest Florida fishing guide and newspaper columnist prior to writing his popular series of novels about the fictional Doc Ford, marine biologist and former intelligence officer who calls on past skills to protect Sanibel Islanders from poachers and other sinister threats. More than once, White's early novels would respectively refer to the real-life Esperanza Woodring and her larger-than-life presence in Sanibel's fishing industry.
Mrs. Woodring did not mince words. She was one tough lady. And she occasionally had a mouth like a sailor. You did not cross Esperanza Woodring. But more than once, I would be out, and she would be in her little green boat, and she couldn't get her kicker started. She, by then, was 90 years old. She's still out there pulling this hand crank kicker motor, and I would help her get her motor started. And she would say, "Thank you very much." I'd say, "Yes, ma'am." It's always yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, with her.
How you doing? I'm Randy White. Welcome to a very special edition of On the Water. Today we're going to be talking to one of the real pioneers of Sanibel Island, Florida, Esperanza Woodring.
White would go on to produce a television show called On the Water for the local PBS television station, and though Esperanza rarely gave recorded interviews, she agreed to do the show with White along with her son Ralph.
Now, we're in Tarpon Bay, and as you know, I was a guide there at Tarpon Bay Marina for slightly over 10 years, and never saw many tarpon in this bay during my years here.
Really?
Did there used to be a lot of tarpon in Tarpon Bay?
Oh, yeah, a lot of them. You couldn't hardly fish in here for them sometimes, and trout. There wasn't no such a thing as catching one that was too little because they were all great, big, overgrown things. And you'd hook a tarpon, it wouldn't be nothing at all. If you wasn't careful, he'd jump in the boat. In fact, there was about 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, some guy was fishing in here and a tarpon jumped in his boat.
I think it was old George Canarum.
Yeah.
It's been a while back.
Yeah. I guess I like to scare them to death. But I've seen them in here so thick you'd think they were, well, just like I said before, like mullet.
I said, Mrs. Woodring, you've been on this bay forever. I've been a guide here for quite a long time myself. What do you think about all the fast power boats now, all the boating traffic? She said, well, sir, I'll tell you a story. One year, 4 or 5 years ago, I was out with clients in my little green boat fishing up alongside Green Point. That's right at the mouth of Tarpon Bay. And one of the big power boats come flying by, washed me into the bushes. The woman on my boat got so upset, she started crying. The man, he didn't pay me. And 92-year-old Esperanza Woodring looked at me and she pointed and said, it was you, you son of a bitch. I said, Mrs. Woodring, that wasn't 5 years ago, ma'am, that was 10. And I stopped and apologized.
She lived it not because of interviews. She didn't live it to be famous. She lived it because that was who she is. She cared without judgment. She had a lot of things going against her, but she just kept on going. You're not supposed to be a fishing guide. She was one of the first, she was probably the first female fishing guide and one of the best.
Anyone on the island that's been here more than 30, 40 years that didn't know her or appreciate what she did for the island, not only for each individual on the island, that they had something to do with her in some way, but the island itself, the tourism benefited from her and her influence on the people here that would go, back north and talk about it and tell stories about it.
Esperanza's status as an island icon has reached well beyond Southwest Florida's borders. When the Florida Museum of Natural History on the University of Florida campus wanted to create an exhibit about the 6,000-year relationship between people and the estuaries of South Florida, they used a likeness of Esperanza on one of the exhibit murals to represent the Spanish-American community of fishermen who once dominated this coastline. She's accompanied in the mural by a member of the Calusa civilization that preceded the Spanish and Native American fisherfolk who lived here, as well as by children who represent the residents of today and tomorrow. The mural was created following more than a decade of archaeological research on Southwest Florida's barrier islands in the late 1980s and early 1990s by University of Florida archaeologist Bill Marquardt and his team. Marquardt told us that mural artist Bob Beach and exhibit designer Dor Dennis actually spent time on the ground in Southwest Florida to make sure they depicted this area accurately. About the same time this exhibit was being planned, author Robert Edick was collecting oral histories from members of fishing industry families that have populated Southwest Florida since the late 1800s. The University of Florida sponsored research was published as a book called Fisherfolk of Charlotte Harbor, and Esperanza was prominently featured along with other longtime islanders. In an interview with Bob Edick on the front porch of her Woodring Point home, Edick captured Esperanza's memories and recounted them in several chapters of his book. Prior to the production of this documentary, only written transcripts were available of the interviews with Esperanza and others. But thanks to a donation from Ralph and Jean Woodring, the original recordings of the fisherfolk interviews have been restored and digitized for use by future scholars and producers at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. Because of this, viewers of this documentary will be the first to actually hear Esperanza's interview outside of the Edick Project's original team. To our knowledge, this is one of only 2 publicly available recordings of Esperanza Woodring, the other being the video we showed you earlier from Randy Wayne White. Both provide valuable historical insight into the prevalence of fishing as a major economic influence on Southwest Florida.
Esperanza Woodring on April 17th, 1990.
The amount was running, they would be the easiest because they'd be in these schools. Now you're not going to believe this, but they used to come along the edge of that beach there and the wharf was in big fish, you know, and it'd be just school and school. And my husband, Sam, used to go out there with a pitchfork. Now, you're not going to believe that. And he'd catch whatever he wanted to eat the next day with a pitchfork. And they'd be right up there. I imagine you could have picked them up with your hand because they were so close to the beach.
This picture of Sam Woodring Jr. and his young wife Esperanza tells the tale of the blending of two distinct cultures, both of which played major roles in Southwest Florida history. Esperanza's grandfather, fisherman Torriva Papi Padilla, moved to Southwest Florida in the late 1800s from the Canary Islands, a group of islands off the west coast of Africa controlled by Spain. After stops in Cuba and Key West, Padilla established a commercial fishing operation based on Cayo Costa, but with branches on Sanibel and Captiva. Cuba was the primary market for the fish caught by this fishing rancho enterprise. The father of Esperanza's husband, Sam Woodring Sr., was one of the original homesteaders of Sanibel in the 1880s. Coming from a French and German heritage, his ancestors had been given land grants in Pennsylvania in the mid-1700s. During the U.S. Civil War, Woodring served in Florida as a Union soldier and had resolved to return to Florida once the war ended.
Sam Woodring Sr. was a blacksmith, and I think basically he liked the look of Florida and had heard about homesteading gradually opening up in various areas of Florida.
Island historian and author Betty Ann Holt says Sam Woodring used his skills as a blacksmith and metal worker to land a job at a new hotel being built at St. James City on Pine Island.
They had their eye on Sanibel. Sanibel hadn't quite opened for homesteading. And once it did open in July, I believe, of 1888, Sam Sr. had basically already planned out what he was going to do as far as building his house. He had the lumber ordered from Key West, and they moved over almost immediately. He was one of the, if not the first homesteader on the island, and owned 102.44 acres of land, which he subdivided. His subdivision, the S.B. Woodring subdivision, was the first subdivision on the island. And that subdivision does still exist today. Sam Sr. Passed away in 1899. He was only 59 years old. And once he was gone, Anna, with her 5 children, opened a boarding house with the house that Sam had built for them, and had a great reputation as a cook, as she had at St. James City as well.
Sam Woodring Jr. was one of the children who came from Pennsylvania with his mom and dad and came to live at the Sanibel homestead. There were few choices as an occupation for young men on Sanibel in the late 1800s, fishing and farming being the top two. Sam Woodring Jr. chose fishing and went on to become a well-regarded fishing guide on nearby Boca Grande and Usepa, which were well established as winter getaways for wealthy fishing enthusiasts from the north. This picture shows a young Sam Woodring with the most sought-after catch of the time, the tarpon. Sam's client, the man in the lower right of the picture, is said to be Edward vom Hoff, one of the most famous anglers of the late 1800s and the inventor of a fishing reel that revolutionized big game angling.
Tarpon fishing was very popular at the turn of the century, and Sam was working up at Usepa Island, working for the sport fishing industry, at least in the winter time. That would not have been so much a summertime thing. So I would imagine in the summer he would be more oriented to commercial fishing. And no doubt interacted at that point with the Padilla family over on Cayo Costa.
There is clear evidence that Sam Woodring Jr. worked with the Padilla family when he was a young man. This 1901 photo we showed you earlier of the Padilla family on Cayo Costa is from the Fisher Folk of Charlotte Harbor book. It shows Captain Torriva Pappy Padilla, his wife Juanita, and their extended family. The infant in the picture is actually Esperanza. She's with her mother Rosa, who was Torriva and Juanita's daughter. And in the upper right, peeking out from behind the shoulder of another Padilla family member, is a young Sam Woodring Jr., family friend and some say a boarder on the property.
My grandfather had what they used to call a fishing ranch, one in Cayo Costa and one on Captiva and one on Sanibel.
Now tell me what a fish ranch is. You hear a lot about that when you read about Southwest Florida history.
Well, it was where this people used to be a captain. He didn't do anything but give orders. And there'd be about 25 or 30 men that worked the nets and did the fish, and they'd sold them and put the roe in, sold them in barrels, wooden barrels, and they'd ship them to Cuba or, I don't know, wherever they could.
The connection between Cuba and the islands of Southwest Florida is extremely strong. It's over 500 years old, and it's still strong. The legacy lives on to this very day.
Southwest Florida historian and author Robert Maycomber says the Padilla fishing operation established on Southwest Florida's barrier islands wasn't that different from the Spanish and Native American fishing organizations of previous centuries.
It started with Ponce de Leon, who came here in 1513 and again in 1521. And when he came the second time, the Calusa were ready for him, attacked him, and killed him. The Calusa held off the Spanish for over 150, almost 200 years. And so the fishermen did not really arrive until the 1600s, and they came in the guise of Franciscan monks. And the monks had to eat, and they saw that the Calusa were, the remnants of the Calusa by that point, were fishing. There was tremendous fishery here. You didn't even have to be a fisherman to catch fish. You just needed a net. And then finally, some civilians were coming out of Cuba. The islands up here had better fisheries than the islands on the north coast of Cuba. They were Spanish fishermen from the Spanish Canary Islands. And the Canary Islanders were known as excellent seamen and fishermen. They still are to this day. So they started coming up and they ran into a kind of fish that most of our people don't know about unless you grew up here, like I did. Mullet. And the mullet was highly prized as a delicacy and as a great fish back in Cuba. So we have a situation that by the early 1800s, this is an established and very, very lucrative trade. We see the Cubans mainly staying out during the Civil War. But after the Civil War, you start to see Cuban fishermen coming back. Particularly in the early 1870s, we see the legendary Pappy Padilla. He came and started his settlement on Cayo Costa Island, where he ended up having a very large family, which are still in these islands, and I count them among my friends. So in 1901, our very own Esperanza has been, by the way, that means hope in Spanish, which I love that. And so she's born on Cayo Costa. And she's born to a daughter of Pappy Padilla, who married the Almas family. So she grew up in these thatched huts. It's called bohíos. She grew up in this hardscrabble life. I know people that were born on Cayo Costa Island. I know people that were the descendants of all of those people, and I went to school with them, and you knew right away they were different. They were self-reliant, they were unfailingly polite, they were really physically strong, and they were very impressive people. back then and now.
Despite the hardscrabble life, Esperanza did receive an education in her early years, first at a school on her home island of Cayo Costa, and later at the nearby island of Ponablanca. A schoolboat would pick up children from the islands of Pine Island Sound and Charlotte Harbor and take them to the school.
They had the school on Cayo Costa then?
Yeah, that's the school I went to.
And then they moved out to Ponablanca?
Well, I don't know if they moved the house, but they had a schoolhouse in Ponablanca. When the first teacher that I had, his name was Captain Peter Nelson. Now, I know you've heard of him. He was a great old guy.
Captain Peter Nelson was a colorful character in local history who served in several civic leadership roles in the Fort Myers area. He served on the local school board, then became one of the first members of the Board of Lee County Commissioners when the county was formed in 1887. Because of his civic contributions, he came to be known as the Benevolent Dane and was rumored to be the illegitimate son of the King of Denmark. His reputation as a hard drinker got him into trouble at times, but he was also known as a kind man and a visionary. He donated land for Lee County's first public library, helped develop the town of Alva, and worked as a ship's pilot, postmaster, and, as you heard from Esperanza, was a teacher at Cayo Costa.
Kids in those days did not go to school very long, usually 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and that was about it. And so she came here to live with my dad on this point when she was like 16.
I'm sure Esperanza was always more or less in the picture, or the whole Padilla family, basically. But by the late teens, certainly she became their housekeeper for a while. She had moved back and forth. She was up in Dunedin. She was down in Cuba. There were, a number of movements, but by the late teens, she was living on Sanibel, and a short time thereafter, Sam and Esperanza were married.
It was the second marriage for Sam Woodring Jr. He and Esperanza went on to have two sons, Preston in 1919 and Ralph in 1937. Preston left home in his teenage years, first to join the Civil Conservation Corps and later to start a military career.
My brother went into the service in the Air Force and spent, I think, about 25 years or so in the Air Force. And he came to Sanibel. He worked for me at South Seas Plantation for a while. He was a head waiter. Anyway, then later on, he went to work for the water company and was there for, I guess, about 10 years. I think he retired from that program there, too.
Ralph was 18 years younger than Preston and only 5 years old when his father died in 1942. Esperanza was left at home on Woodring Point with her younger son, some fishing equipment and property, but not a lot of money. But what she did have was what she had learned about fishing from her husband.
He and my mom were fishermen, and he taught her how to fish, how to catch fish, how to throw a cast net. And the good thing he did, because he passed away, I guess I was like about 5, and she had to survive on whatever she could make fishing and in later years doing other things too.
When did you start guiding?
Let's see, in about 44, and about, that's what my husband used to do. He fished in the summertime, and in the wintertime he used to guide, and after he passed away, I just took over. And
so he guided for trout and redfish?
No, he took out fishing parties.
What did they fish for mostly?
Anything they could catch. They'd go out, say about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. They'd be back in about 1 o'clock, and then have the boats so full of fish they wouldn't know what to do with them. They'd throw them overboard. He used to get his parties up there, Tarpon Bay. There used to be a dock down there. He used to get these people from the Matthews Hotel and the Captiva Island. The names have been changed since then.
Being a fishing guide on Sanibel in the 1940s was not a usual thing for a woman. And in fact, it's still not a usual thing for a woman. But you do what you have to do, and that's exactly what Esperanza did. She was very knowledgeable. She taught many a sport fisherman, and they revered her.
She knew the area pretty damn good, like the back of her hand, if you will, as the old saying goes. You know, where the fish lay and where to fish, how to fish, whatever. Usually she took 2 people because it was a small boat, and you know, she liked to fish with folks that liked to fish and wanted to fish, but she also did shelling trips. The idea was to get them here on a low tide and go on the flats, and they would shell for, you know, a couple, 3 hours, and that's pretty good amount of time to spend for a shell trip.
Esperanza took on whatever came to her, and certainly she was into the fishing, as Sam was. She knew a lot about it. He had taught her quite a bit, and certainly her family, grandfather, parents, whatever, had taught her as well. She also did housekeeping. She did babysitting, whatever came along.
March 2025. Friends and relatives of Ralph and Jean Woodring gather at their home on Woodring Point to celebrate some family birthdays. This is the same building where Esperanza and Sam raised their children, give or take a few modifications over the years due to hurricane damage and normal wear and tear. And it's been home to multiple generations of the Woodring family.
Esperanza was my grandmother. I grew up in this house with her. I essentially had 3 parents. I had my dad, my mother, and my grandmother. My bedroom was actually part of her bedroom. And so I was very, very close to my grandmother. And, you know, kids have nightmares and things when you're little. And when I did, she was the one who was there to comfort me and pick me up and put me in bed with her. And so that was very special for me.
Julie and her siblings weren't the only kids to roam the grounds of Woodring Point. One of the many jobs Esperanza took on to support her family was that of babysitter, and she often looked after the children of several of Sanibel's pioneer families. Kids like Mark and Deb McQuaid, whose family owned one of the early tourist cottage operations, Ray Rhodes, son of a butcher who worked at the Bailey store, and the children of Bailey store owner Frances Bailey.
Well, I am Frances Bailey's middle daughter, and there were 5 of us, 1 son. We lost our mother at a very young age. We were all small children, and that's sort of how we became grandchildren to Esperanza. My dad's a workaholic, and he was kind of lost with 5 little teeny children, so she stepped in to help him, and so he could run the business. And she was like a grandmother to us. Compassionate, loving, caring, you know, fed us, hugs. I still remember her smell. She always had a towel on her shoulder, and because there was no AC, it was pretty warm during summer, and she took us out in the boat. She just living on Woodring Point for us was idyllic.
She was a lady that could do about anything, but then a lot of the island ladies were that way. But she would fish all day on a boat and come in and still get the wood fire going, and I mean, totally self-sufficient. She was. She really didn't need anyone other than Esperanza, you know, to do what she wanted to do.
My dad would drive us down there sometimes, and it was always fun because you'd go into the yard and it'd be full of chickens and goats and everything, and it was just the most unique home on the island, the most unique. and you could walk out on her dock, and that was the epitome of island living.
So she, took care of us and taught me more fishing secrets of hers, and she even made me my first cast net and taught me how to throw it, whether it be on the lawn at the house or over at her house throwing off her dock, whatever. But she made the net and taught me how to use it.
And she pretty much let us have a run of the property. We would go swimming off the dock, chase chickens. We fished. She taught us how to fish and throw a cast net. She took us in the boat. Not every day, but a lot of days she took us over. There was a mud flat right across from her house, and we would go check out angel wings that were alive, and they were probably this big. And so we'd check that out, and we'd plant them right back in. But she took us fishing, and we'd go hunting and go to some of her favorite little places that she knew about and didn't take her clients to.
Esperanza was kind and giving person, but she was also no nonsense. When she said she was going to do something, she did it. If she told you that she'd be there for you, she'd be there for you.
To know her compassionate side as opposed to her outdoors woman fishing guide side, because I don't think a lot of people saw that. Just the type of grandmotherly person that she was to us, and the way that she took care of us, her caring personality and the hugs, and just a very sweet, loving person that most people probably didn't see.
If I recall correctly, my fiance at the time, but now my wife of, golly day, almost 50 years, said that somebody I want you to meet. We got to go. I want to introduce you to Esperanza.
While production of this documentary was underway, Richard Johnson and his wife Meade were operating the Island store on Captiva as an outgrowth of their century-old family business, the Bailey General Store, run by Meade's father, Francis Bailey. Their main facility on Sanibel was destroyed by Hurricane Ian, and during the production of this documentary, plans were underway to construct a new and improved facility. They met as young adults while attending college in Johnson's native Virginia, and after their engagement, one of their first visits upon returning to Sanibel was to Woodring Point, so Meade could introduce Richard to the woman she considered to be like a grandmother.
We walked up and knocked on the door frame because the door was sitting open. You could look right into the house. And she came over and invited us in. Mary Meade introduced me, and she smiled and said she was happy to meet me. And she commanded me, come in the house and sit down. And the grandmother in her came out and clearly indicated to me that she would be watching and paying attention to how I treated her little girl. And she told me in no uncertain terms, you need not worry about her father. You need to be concerned about me. And I said, yes, ma'am. And I understand. And although I know you will, you need not worry. And she said, no, I don't need to worry. You need to worry. Because if you don't treat her right, you will be answering to me.
Teaching kids to be self-sufficient and to live a good life, to be respectful, to learn how to do things and do things right was important to her. When she was teaching, whether it was us kids or the Baileys or whoever, it's something as simple as sweeping the floor. She'd hand you the broom, she'd show you how to do it, and if you didn't do it right the first time, she'd point it out and say, no, you didn't do this right, you forgot that spot over there, look at all that dirt in the corner. Do it again and do it right. and you did it till you got it right.
Well, I think she had, I mean, it was an old wood stove, an old wood cooking stove, and it looked like a traditional with a cooktop, but it was actually wood fire, and she cooked in a big iron skillet, and her biscuits, you could smell the biscuits. She made fresh biscuits. Fresh, you would get smoked fish or just raw mullet and fry it, and probably the best mullet I've ever had in my life.
She never measured anything. She knew, and as far as I know, most of it was not written down. She threw things together and made concoctions that, people would look at you and just go, shake their head. But she could cook. There is no doubt about that.
Esperanza was also the first person I ever saw cook on a wood stove without a frying pan. She just cleaned off the top of the stove, and that was her griddle.
Charlie Watson was not one of the kids who was babysat by Esperanza, but was a high school friend of her son Ralph, and he spent a lot of time at Woodring Point during that friendship. Ralph and Charlie got a chance to catch up during the annual picnic of the Lee County Pioneer Club, made up of people whose families have lived in Lee County for more than 50 years. After the picnic, they got a chance to reminisce at Woodring Point about their time together at Fort Myers High School.
Well, Ralph and I got to be, fairly good friends, and I talked him into going out for football. His mama was not happy, to say the least. She wasn't happy at all, but then she realized that he was pretty good at it, so she kind of eased off a little bit. He didn't make the first string his junior year, but his senior year, he was the defensive man on that football team. And Esperanza, she went to all his football games his senior year. If he was a little bit slow to get up, you almost had to hang on to her and keep her in the stands, because she was going to go out there and take care of that boy. She didn't want that boy hurt.
She had hands that were tough as leather, hard as nails, but they were soft as satin too. She could mend any hurt, and help any child out for whatever. She was very tender, but she was also very tough at the same time.
She was the realest person, and if you walked on this property, she didn't know you, she'd walk out with a 10 gauge, and buddy, you better either answer correctly or you're going to get lead in your ass. Respect her and she'll respect you. You don't respect her, she'll fill you full of lead.
Dave Godfrey came into Esperanza's life as a young man working for Ralph at the Bait Box, a bait and fishing supply business Esperanza helped her son get started on Periwinkle Way on Sanibel after Ralph returned from a stint in the Air Force. Esperanza was often on the boats that would go out at night shrimping and catching other bait fish that were sold at the shop and from her own backyard at Woodring Point.
Live it, eat it, breathe it. Esperanza did. She started a lot of these businesses. She didn't start, she helped so many people start their original businesses on this island without anyone's knowledge. She did it because she loved the island and she loved the community and she believed in those people.
So people have sort of invested in Esperanza some sort of mythic quality, I think. And they want to be associated with that, or they try to create that. And to me, she was just a wonderful person that was a strength of this family. A real strength of this family, but a quiet strength.
Paul Zajac and his brother David made friends with Ralph's sons when their dad moved to Sanibel in the 1960s and bought one of the tourist cottage operations. Later, they would work at the Bait Box, and part of their duties would be to transport the bait fish caught overnight from the live well at Woodring Point to the shop on Periwinkle.
Well, my initial interaction with Esperanza was kind of limited to just coming down here and picking up the bait. And she'd be out burning pine needles and stuff to drive off the sand flies, which were just unbelievable. But later on, I'd be down here with Wayne and Shane, and a couple times we harvested some of her chickens and rabbits. But and then after I got married, we'd come down here and sit on the porch with Esperanza. She took a real interest in our family, and was always enjoyed talking to us.
I would come in the morning to pick up the bait, and I'd come screaming around this corner, just about as fast as was relatively safe, and typically no exhaust in these things either. And then I'd go screaming on out of here, and one day I hit one of her ducks. She liked different kinds of ducks and geese and chickens and all this stuff, and normally they'd get out of the way, but one of them was a little slow, and I guess I didn't know I really hit one. So at the end of the day, I come back, and it's probably 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, and I'm out there, and she walked around barefooted, so you didn't really know where Esperanza was, and she lit into me. I had killed one of her ducks, and I was like mortified. I was like, because I knew that people would bring her these different crazy animals, and here I had killed one. I thought, this is the end of the world. And she looks at me, she says, "Come on in, we're having it for dinner."
It was great, to go down and stay with her. There were some bad things. She had the meanest rooster in the world that, would beat up every kid that walked in the yard. Can spur you. And I also found out you can climb a tree, they can still come up and want to try to get you in the tree. They're a nasty group. I don't like roosters.
She had all kinds of we had all kinds of animals out here. We raised rabbits and chickens and ducks, and I even had a pet turkey one time. Walked inside, that crazy turkey liked to watch TV. And my grandmother loved her soap operas in the afternoons. So she would sit there in her rocking chair and watch her soap operas. And she got up and went to the kitchen to get something to eat, or drink. She'd come back and that turkey would be sitting on the arm of the couch. And she'd pick it up, throw it out the door, and fuss at that turkey for being in her room watching her soaps with her.
There was the soap operas, but more was the like the Waltons and Gunsmoke and that kind of thing. She really liked that, and of course, John Wayne was her favorite. She said that he could put his boots under her bed anytime. But I remember taking her to one of John Wayne's last movies, and she was not a shy woman by any means, and she was raised by fishermen, so she had her own language, but the John Wayne movie that I took her to had some foul language in it, and after it was done, I knew she'd enjoyed it. But I said, "Grandma, how'd you like that?" She said, "It was good, it was real good, but I don't like all that damn cussing and shit."
My children knew Esperanza because she loved all the kids on the island, and it was a real neat situation.
Charles LaBeouf came to know Esperanza and Ralph when he went to work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the late 1950s. In those early years, LaBeouf and the Woodrings would often be at odds, but as the years progressed, they became close friends and shared a love of traditional island life. In fact, when LaBeouf initiated his sea turtle conservation effort in 1968, known as Coretta Research, Esperanza pitched in to help.
In '69, we operated a sea turtle nursery on Tarpon Bay. We had to close that down after the second year because cold weather was just decimated the little turtles. And in those days, I was also getting hatchling green turtles from Florida DNR, from Hutchison Island over on the East Coast. And I couldn't care for all of them, so I asked Esperanza if she would help me out. "Oh, sure," she said. I love those little turtles." So I carried several clutches of little green turtles, and she put them in her shrimp tank. And over time, she would raise the little turtles until they were about a year old, and then I'd release them on the Sanibel beach.
Esperanza spent much of her time working to make ends meet for her family. But that didn't mean she wasn't involved in other aspects of island life. Her name would often be recorded in local newspapers recounting her many successful outings as a fishing guide. But you would also see her name in social columns where she was hosting a ladies' pinnacle club, helping with Boy Scout troop activities, doing committee work with the island's Civic Club, or assisting with Sanibel's very popular annual Shell Fair, where she was also occasionally a prize-winning exhibitor. In the 1950s, she and her teenage son Ralph worked with a team of Florida entomologists in a landmark study about mosquitoes. The study took place at the Sanibel Lighthouse and involved marking mosquitoes with radioactive tracers in order to study their movements. Esperanza and Ralph collected the mosquitoes from the New Jersey light traps distributed around Sanibel and other barrier islands, and the resulting study went on to become the foundation of mosquito control efforts here and around the world. One of her other random jobs was driving some of Sanibel's kids to school on a boat.
There were 5 kids that had to go to school, and the county paid me to take the kids up here to the bus stop. Well, they'd catch the bus stop right there at the crossways to go to Captiva. And when the tide was real low, I couldn't get up there, so I'd have to tote them everyone on my back.
You had to walk them up through the mud.
Well, they'd be dressed, with shoes and everything, and by the time they'd have the shoes off and all their nice school clothes, why, I'd just take them across. Then one day, this one girl, she was almost as big as I was, and she started laughing and giggling, and I dropped her in the mud, and she couldn't go to school. She was crying and mad, about Vivian. Yeah. And this one kid, he was always acting up, so one day I got mad at him and I left him out on the oyster bar. When I come back, I picked him up and took him home, and his daddy and his mother got mad at me because I didn't send him to school.
Esperanza wasn't hugely into politics as a rule, but when something stirred her passion, she was front and center in the fight. That was never more evident than the early 1960s, when she and several of the island's so-called old-timers fought against the construction of the Sanibel Causeway. This letter to the editor of the Fort Myers News Press is a good example of what family members say was one of Esperanza's special skills, letter writing. "We have made our living fishing in these waters for about a century," she wrote. "When the guiding business falls off, we fish to sell. We have heard rumors about a bridge in the bay for years, but never worried too much about it. Somebody said one of the commissioners promised we could vote on a bridge if we voted for him. We did, but he didn't. If the officials had asked us about it, we could have told them, don't put that dam right over our best trout, mackerel, bluefish, and pompano fishing grounds. It means curtains for us in San Carlos Bay." Despite the objections of Esperanza and the other island pioneers, the causeway was built, and many of the predictions they made about a decline in the fish and shellfish populations came true.
I knew a lot of things about my grandmother that other people didn't really know unless they were really an intimate friend. Like, for instance, she was a voracious reader. She read every single day. It didn't matter if it was popular mechanics even, but her favorite was Reader's Digest. She read a lot of National Geographic. And we had friends that had subscriptions to those, and they knew that she just loved to read them, and so they would bring them to her and say, "Here, we thought you'd like to read these," and they'd drop off a big bag of books, and she was happy.
Much has changed at Woodring Point since Sam Woodring Sr. first homesteaded the property in the late 1880s. But the good news is, many things have stayed the same. The house that Esperanza lived in for many of her 91 years on Earth is still standing, notwithstanding some storm-related renovations along the way. Fortunately for future generations, Ralph and Jean Woodring made a deal with the Ding Darling Wildlife Society and Lee County's Conservation 2020 to purchase and preserve 6.5 acres of Woodring Point, an area one Sanibel resident called the soul of the island.
That's an extremely important piece of property. It is one of the last undeveloped pieces of property on Sanibel. It's historic. The Woodring family has lived there, well, in their present residence since 1916 and continuously since 1888. So it is historic and preserves many things about Sanibel that we've lost over the years.
And when we're gone, it will be open to the public in some manner, and we just hope that they can have a good place to come, view things, and enjoy it.
It's our desire to keep that property as a public resource, if you will. It does connect some very important conservation land, and the north, an SACF land, and to the southeast, of course, the federal land for the J.N. Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge. It's also bayfront for San Carlos Bay, Tarpon Bay, and also for the Ladyfinger Lake property. So all those bodies of water, their natural habitat and their preserved habitat for many important species.
The environmental importance of this property is perhaps equaled only by its historical significance. The Native American and Spanish communities who fished these waters for subsistence for hundreds of years were replaced in the 20th century by well-heeled sportsmen seeking the same coastal abundance for recreational purposes. Esperanza Woodring was able to bridge those two eras as a fishing guide and commercial fisherman at a time when only men traditionally assumed those occupations. This 1960s marketing brochure from Priscilla Murphy Realty on Sanibel is perhaps the most succinct historical record of Esperanza's accomplishments. The booklet provided a history of Sanibel Island for visitors, along with information about amenities, attractions, and environmental attributes. On a page titled Friendly Waters, the brochure says, "The islands offer not only great fishing, but the best guides in the country." It lists all the fishing guides available for charter at that time, including Esperanza, and goes on to state, "All guides are gentlemen, except for one. She's a lady." Priscilla Murphy and her husband Pat, who was at one time a mail carrier for the Sanibel Post Office, were good friends with Esperanza. In fact, Priscilla Murphy sold Esperanza the land, which would become the Bait Box, Ralph's longtime fishing supply business. Newspaper accounts of that time would occasionally chronicle when Priscilla's brother, Henry Komeyer of Detroit, would visit and catch tarpon with Esperanza as his guide. Henry was an amateur motion picture photographer who often documented his frequent travels here and elsewhere, and fortunately for us, Woodring Point was occasionally the subject of his movie making. This is Henry himself catching a shark off the dock of Woodring Point in the 1950s. This clip is a reminder of the many early island characters who visited Esperanza and the Woodring family. This is Pegleg Dugan, playing with one of the Woodring goats at a home provided to him by a neighbor of the Woodrings after his original fish house on the bay was destroyed by a storm. Esperanza had found his Pegleg floating in the water behind her house after the storm and assumed he had died. But he was later found alive and allowed to live in this neighbor's shed. Dugan would go on to help Esperanza make and mend her extensive collection of fishing nets. Henry Komeyer took this movie footage of the various nets Esperanza used during the various phases of her commercial fishing operations. Here is another view of Esperanza's yard, filled with chickens, ducks, and other animals that she considered both as pets and sometimes food. Here we see a teenage Ralph Woodring, first catching horseshoe crabs in San Carlos Bay behind his home, and later digging for clams, something he and his mom often did together. There are also scenes representative of the many sea creatures which once were abundant in the bay waters of Sanibel. And finally, we see the only known film recording of Esperanza Woodring cast netting, a fitting symbol of her extraordinary life as a fishing guide, commercial fisherman, mother, grandmother, friend, neighbor, and island pioneer.
She was not just a fisher person. Esperanza was an environmentalist. And I think, in my opinion, she helped get that environmental movement started here locally on Sanibel and Captiva. So I think we, those of us that live here today, those of us that may have a second home here, owe her a debt of gratitude for the actions that she took many years ago to help get that environmental frame of mind like many people have today. Had it not been for Esperanza Woodring, I believe this would be a very different place than it is today.